I wanted to better understand the warning message from Canada's Public Budget Officer. Quote, we are seeing the precipice coming, and quote, he keeps telling us over and over again in every major television appearances that he is doing. Some major changes are also needed, he keeps saying, especially fiscally speaking. If not, well, things are gonna get real ugly and rather soon. Our time span, the next upcoming 5 years. This is also his projection in his brand new report released in late September. Evaluating our national deficit, this report is not even considering the immense spending that Canada ended up agreeing upon for our NATO contribution. Also, when Canada keeps saying that our debt is reasonable, can we truly take this statement for granted? Welcome, everyone. This is a boring topic, but with so many potential consequences for our future. Let's talk about budget and deficit for Canada. Jacob Jacques is Canada's Public Budget Officer by interim, sitting in the seat for a 6 months period while Canada is looking at filling the job permanently. Mr. Jacques was nominated by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Neutral, nonpartisan, and independent, his job is to give MPs and senators the real numbers. He also puts a price on political promises and making sure that parliamentarians cannot hide the math from the Canadian public. Having released his report in late September, Mr. Jacques ended up doing a media tour explaining to Canadians what he sees with Canada's budget situation. On one of these occasions, he was talking with CTV. As shown here, Mr. Jacques gave a 10 minutes long interview where he gives his diagnosis of the situation. Now, this man is kind of careful in his words, never giving some proper stat, but always saying that the signs are clearly showing a dire scenario at bay. Think of the guy like a medical doctor and his patient, the Canadian finances, his diagnosis. Well, all signs are kind of pointing to an upcoming fiscal heart attack. His report is projecting things 5 years into the future, and his message is clear. We need to change our habits now, or we are going to face dire consequences later. This is how he roughly put it within this CTV interview.
The world order that we've had for the past 75 years is done. That both has geopolitical considerations around additional spending or increasing spending on the defense side, which is definitely a spending pressure. It also has immediate pressures in terms of the Canadian economy and the definitely the attenuating or the diminishing of the linkages with the U.S. and our need to find other linkages outside the country. So in short, it means a lot of change within a relatively short period of time.
So to all of you catastrophic people, no, Canada is not on the verge of financial collapse. However, Mr. Jacques is kind of flagging a red flag, and September report may ended up telling the reason why. Now, Mr. Jacques' reports ended up being published on September the 25th, 2025. Consider it as a snapshot of Canada's finances, and it shows why we may be in such a precarious state. Now, this report contains a lot of numbers, and I am not going to show you all of them because we just might end up getting lost in everything, but suffice to say that there are some very interesting statistics in there, and one of them is Canada's national deficit. Now, let's start by 2024. Our country ended up spending $52 billion more than we were supposed to, and this year This could get as high as $68 billion. Now, keep in mind that this may be a conservative estimate on the state of Mr. Jacques, and I am going to explain to you a little bit later as to why this is the case in this video. We may end up be stuck with deficit roughly around $60 billion every single year starting 2025 up to 2030, and this is very problematic. Why? Well, because when Canada ended up facing COVID, it was kind of a one-time emergency spending program. So spending went through the roof and we ended up generating massive deficit. But after the pandemic and when society started to reopen, the problem is the spending never truly came back up to $0. As you can see in this graphic in here, I ended up asking ChatGPT to get me all of the official numbers and to produce a graph about Canada's national deficit year after year after year. If we start by looking at the orange line, you see it's going super down into year 2020 and 2021. The lower you are in the graphic, the more deficit you're generating. So as you can see here, spending kind of ended up going up, but we are mostly getting around the minus 50 to minus $60 billion deficit. This blue line, this pointy blue line, is what the PBO's report is predicting, that we are still going to stay into the minus 50 to $60 billion year after year after year. So what does it say? A decade and a half in red ink. And remember, these numbers do not include the brand new spending that was announced to meet with NATO's requirement. And when you add Mark Carney's new promises for NATO, then I think that this fiscal heart attack may comes even faster than we all anticipated. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, known as NATO, is a huge organization composed of 32 countries. Its mission is basically to maintain peace and watch the communist menace within the European continent. NATO's mission is one of collective defense. Let's say that if one of the members is getting attacked, then all of the other 31 has to join and reply to the threat. Founded in 1948, NATO has been an increasing force into adding more and more countries, especially since the fall of the USSR in the early 1990s. To be part of NATO is an incredible privilege, but one that also comes with responsibilities. For example, every NATO member is expected to spend at least 2% of its entire GDP to boost up their defense every single year. In the case of Canada, it's never been a reality. For you see, in 2024, Canada's NATO spending kind of was around 1.3% of Canada's GDP. However, in 2025, Mark Carney recently decided to announce that enough is enough. Canada is supposed to contribute up to 2% of our GDP, and so this is going to be done. So what does it mean? Well, it means that in 2024, that 1.3% would equal something around $26 to $27 billion. In 2025, this year, we're going from 27 to $40 billion. That's our 2%. That extra $13 billion that just magically appear as brand new spending, that's the money that the PBO is not counting into his report. So this is a brand new spending that is going straight into our national debt. And even more worrying, NATO has just decided in March of 2025, if memory serves, that 2% was not good enough anymore. It's now been cranked up to 5% by year 2035. Okay, so what does it mean? Well, Canada's GDP at this time is around $2 trillion per year, basically $2,000 billion of everything we made. That's the value of our entire economy. So 5% of that sum is going to be given to NATO every year starting 2035. For Canada, that immense sum of money would be around $100 billion a year straight to NATO. Keep in mind that I am using Canada's GDP for 2025, 2 trillion. In 2035, nothing is saying that Canada's GDP will not be 2.5 trillion. If this is the case, 5% of 2.5 could be $120 billion. Just to give you guys a little idea, what you're looking here is the graph directly from the government of Canada of the healthcare federal transfers to the provinces. Now, if you look at the dark orange columns, these are the expected amount that the government is going to contribute for the next upcoming 5 years. And you see that the column is going up and up and up and up every single year. One could argue that by 2035, unfortunately, I don't have the statistic, but if this is keep going up and up and up, by 2035, we could probably say that the healthcare transfer might go to $100 billion a year. So just to give you guys an idea, it means that in the middle of the 2030s, the NATO spending will end up matching literally our healthcare transfer, creating a second healthcare system, fiscally speaking, right above our head and supported by our tax money. Now, these NATO's projections are so mesmerizing that our PBO is currently working on a brand new addendum to his September 25 reports. Hence the reason why the NATO's numbers were not included, because he is taking this so seriously that Mr. Jacques is going to look at what this potential $100 billion spending in 2025 could mean, and he is going to come back with a brand new updated numbers for this immense fiscal impact. So when Mr. Jacques is saying that we are seeing the precipice, I think I am starting to understand what he really means. Now, another thing that is super interesting in this report is the ratio of our national debt to our GDP. Ottawa is telling us that Canada's national debt is roughly around 42% of our GDP. Not great, however, we're not into such a crisis on that number alone. I would be surprised if Wall Street would start panicking, hence the reason why Canada is probably one of the rare countries on earth with its AAA credit score rating. But here's the catch. Ottawa is only talking about what they call the net debt, the money that is being borrowed directly and that Ottawa must pay back. But the Fraser Institute is pointing out that this is not the entirety of the story, because Canada is also carrying what we call a gross debt. And this time, this includes promises made to retirees, to the Canada's pension plan and the Quebec pension plan, for example. Also, this gross debt might include all of the debt from the provinces, from the cities, even the paramunicipal bodies like Hydro-Quebec or many of the public transit societies within this country. Now, this is an important point to take into consideration, because there is an economist from the province of Quebec that is now a TV host who ended up writing a column about this particular topic within the Journal of Montréal, and this guy is ended up making the exact same argument. That is, Ottawa is bragging that 42% debt to its GDP ratio, but if you start adding everything else, municipalities and public agency, Canada is going from 42 to 100 to 110%. And at this point, we are starting to look a lot more like France and Italy, where this immense national debt is kind of overwhelming their own little economy. So when Ottawa is saying that we're fine, don't worry about it, it is true, yes, but it's kind of just telling half of the story, because the net debt and the gross debt, both numbers can exist, but they tell a very different story. Let me give you guys an analogy. So let's say that your net debt is your credit card balance, let's say, all right? Your gross debt is everything you have: mortgage, car loan, credit card. You could technically pay off your entirely of your credit card by going and taking the money away from the college fund of your kids. On paper, you don't have any credit card debt anymore, but the burden ended up not going away because you just ended up pushing it into the future. So now your kids will have to suffer the debt of their college tuition. But this is more or less the same thing for Canada. When Ottawa is saying that 42% is good, but then, for example, you have the Canada's pension plan's obligation that you need to give money to the actual, but also to the future retirees, and this is creating a debt on the mid and long term, and you put everything together, we are kind of looking at 100 to 110%. And the real problem is whether it's Ottawa, Quebec, BC, Toronto, Hydro-Quebec, the Toronto transit system, they're all taxing and they're all taking money within the same exact pockets. Ours. So, alright guys, before we are wrapping this up, I just want to be clear about one thing. I am not an economist, nor do I have any degree in finance or economy. But the reason as to why I decided to produce this very boring video is because when I see our PBO doing a mediatical tour and saying that we are standing on the edge of a fiscal cliff, I really wanted to understand why, especially coming from this guy, because he is not a politician. He is not doing any kind of cheap politics with this. And so what I ended up finding into his report and all the research that I did, I just wanted to share with all of you. This is just an honest attempt to make sense of all the numbers and to try to explain and to understand in plain words why our PBO is kind of raising all of those flags around. And we are not done yet. As I told you before, Mr. Jacques is preparing an addendum to his current report, and all of the NATO brand new commitment and all of that new money is going to be touched. And those numbers are really going to give us an even more precise picture of the gravity of this situation. And when this addendum report is going to come out, I will be there and I will make a following up video to this one to include all of those brand new numbers. So if this is something that is of interest to you, you know what you have to do. Smash all the buttons down below, and we are going to keep digging to really find out and try to explain and to understand what's really happening with Canada's finances. Until then, I will see you guys in the next one.